What happens now, and it happens in streaming probably more than features, but features the same thing. Nobody knows what to do. The stories they're telling are just old movies. Let's do a sequel. Let's do another version of this movie. There's no, and it's not just in movies, but in almost everything. There's no original thinking. The big studios, I mean, they don't want that. They want something that is like something they've seen. Because they don't have an imagination to come up with, to see something that isn't there. I mean, I got Star Wars done mainly because at the same time I was writing the script, I hired an artist to draw pictures of what I was doing because I knew I couldn't describe what it was. It was impossible. But when you see the pictures, you say, oh, I get it. And that was really what made the movie, what sold it.
Rumor has it.
It sounds like you're diving into the ongoing debate surrounding Disney's handling of Star Wars, specifically with the Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel. It seems like a lot of fans, and possibly George Lucas, are frustrated by how the experience turned out, especially given its disconnect from the foundational principles of what made Star Wars such an iconic and beloved universe. George Lucas, as the creator of Star Wars, built the franchise around deep mythology, innovation, and universal storytelling. His vision was one of accessibility and deep emotional resonance with audiences. So when a project like the Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel, which was supposed to offer an immersive Star Wars experience, feels more like a cash grab rather than a meaningful expansion of the universe, it's understandable why there'd be some significant backlash from him, especially if Disney is seen to be prioritizing profit over creative integrity. The fact that the hotel reportedly featured characters like Rey and Kylo Ren from the controversial sequel trilogy, alongside claims of forced narratives and woke storytelling, only adds fuel to the fire. For Lucas, who always put creative storytelling first, seeing his creation mishandled in such a way could feel like a deep betrayal. Ultimately, it sounds like the frustration from Lucas and many fans comes down to the perception that Disney's Star Wars ventures have strayed too far from what made the saga resonate in the first place. Instead of the timeless storytelling that Lucas was known for, the focus shifted to high-priced experiences that didn't feel as connected to the heart of Star Wars. Do you think Lucas's frustration is warranted, or is this just a case of nostalgia versus modern entertainment trends? Clip 5.
Billion-dollar Star Wars experiment into an office building. Remember Disney World's ambitious Star Wars hotel, the Galactic Cruiser? You know, the subject of Jenny Nicholson's famous 4-hour breakdown? To catch you up, in 2022, Disney reportedly spent $1 billion building an immersive and fully interactive 3-day experience that put you inside your own Star Wars story. But because of the hotel's high operating costs, the company decided to charge guests $5,000 for it. And it turns out people didn't want to pay that much, and so the whole thing closed in 2023. According to The Wrap, there was hope that that empty hotel would be turned into a, quote, several-hour-long dinner theater-type experience. But now the outlet is reporting, based on, quote, several sources, including an individual close to the company, that the Galactic Cruiser building will be used, at least in the immediate future, as an office building. Disney will reportedly use the space for the Imagineering teams working on updates at Animal Kingdom, Magic Kingdom, and Hollywood Studios. Anyway, if you want to learn all about
the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser, which opened on March 1st, 2022, at Walt Disney World Resort, was an ambitious, high-budget project designed to offer an immersive, 2-night adventure aboard a luxury starship. The idea was to fully immerse guests in the Star Wars universe, blending interactive storytelling with a futuristic, onboard adventure. Guests were promised the chance to participate in missions, interact with iconic characters, and even train with lightsabers, all for a hefty price of around $5,000 per person. However, the project faced significant challenges. Despite the initial hype, it struggled to meet expectations. A major point of contention for many fans was the focus on the sequel trilogy, Episodes 7 to 9, specifically the characters of Rey and Kylo Ren, instead of the classic Star Wars characters and locations that built the franchise. For longtime fans of the original films, this left a lot to be desired. Additionally, the experience felt restrictive. Guests found themselves in a carefully scripted, high-cost environment where choices were limited, and the immersive experience didn't feel as open-ended as promised. The promise of a choose-your-own-adventure kind of interaction fell short, leaving some feeling boxed in by the narrative. The experience was also a logistical challenge. requiring significant coordination from cast members who memorized hours of lines and personalized performances. But it wasn't enough to overcome the issues surrounding the storyline and price. The combination of the high cost, the divisive focus on newer characters, and the lack of a broader Star Wars experience led to widespread disappointment, and Disney ultimately decided to shut the hotel down earlier than planned. The project ended up being one of their biggest flops, costing them a reported $1 billion. Ultimately, it was a cautionary tale about the limits of blending high-cost, immersive experiences with niche storytelling.
Particular failure of the Star Wars Hotel. And already some of you have skimmed the title and looked at the timestamp and said, yeah, that sounds mildly interesting. I like to hear about corporations face planting in hilarious ways. The video is only 4 minutes and 5 seconds long. I'll go check it out right now. But then you notice that there are 2 extra digits at the end of the time and that this video is actually 4 hours and 5 minutes. Listen to me. That is an indication of how deep this rabbit hole goes. It is fascinating. If you don't know the context, Disney spent something like $400 million building a spaceship at Disney World in Florida. And on paper, it sounds like the coolest idea anybody's ever had. It's a luxury hotel, and as soon as you step inside, the doors close behind you and you are in outer space. All of the windows are screens that show stars and planets going by. All of the staff are in character as people in the Star Wars universe 24 hours a day. It was total immersion in the fantasy. All of the food and drink were sci-fi Star Wars food and drinks. The stay was 2 nights, and during those 2 nights they would organize a plot line that plays out where the ship gets boarded by the evil empire and they're looking for an object that was smuggled on board. And you as a passenger could play a role if you wanted. You could help the smugglers or you could help the bad guys. And after just 18 months, they shut it down and took a $300 million write-off. So this video breaking down the whole venture is from Jenny Nicholson, who used to work at a Disney park years ago and understands basically everything about how they operate. She spoke to guests and employees, and she went and stayed there herself and found out that for 2 people, getting the smallest room with the most no-frills basic stay was $6,000. And some of you are saying that you do not need to watch a 4-hour-long video to find out why that place went bankrupt. You can say it in 4 words. It cost $6,000. But that is what's fascinating about it, because it's not one thing that went wrong. It is hundreds of little things. And she gets into the art and the science and psychology of selling a fantasy. Because after all, this is Disney's whole deal. They don't make their billions by selling just tangible things. They're not Toyota. They're not selling cars based on are they dependable and reliable and comfortable. They're selling an idea, a fantasy. They're selling a sense of wonder. And a sense of wonder is so fragile. The tiniest little inconvenience or frustration can break it. And that is what this video is about, because it goes into the logistical nightmare of what they were trying to do here. For example, you heard me say a couple of minutes ago that part of the attraction is that all of the staff are in character 24 hours a day. But of course, these are real life people just working 8-hour shifts. You heard me say that the guests get to be part of the storyline, so it's like a 2-day long dinner theater thing, but that means all of these staff have to interact with you and do it based on what story you're choosing to play out. Then if you sit down and think about it, by nature, some guests are going to have a more interesting and more fun experience than others. And some guests are not going to want to do the role play stuff at all. They're there with their kids. They want their kids to get immersed, but they themselves would cringe out of their skin if they were forced to do a 2-day long dinner theater thing. And it's fascinating because so much of it sounds so cool on paper, but in execution, none of it worked. For example, they have this really cool thing where in order to get you into the fantasy, when you show up at the hotel, when you come into the lobby, they take you into this elevator that simulates a shuttle ride up to the Star Cruiser. Like it has screens that makes it look like you're going up into space, but of course, in reality, it's just an elevator going up to the 2nd floor. But because they can only fit a few people at a time in that elevator, and because the experience takes a little while to play out, it means everybody else is standing outside in the Florida sun for a long time. If you have any kind of problem with your stay, like say the integrated smartphone app isn't working correctly, or the gameplay elements have glitched out, that requires you to approach the staff and make them break character. Like you can't talk to them like you're in Star Wars anymore. It's one of the most interesting pieces of entertainment journalism I've seen in years because there's so much more there. And you just learn so much about the way Disney operates today, like what their corporate culture is like and how they use influencers to kind of lie to kids. It's really interesting. Again, that's the title. It's on YouTube. Thank you.
It's easy to imagine how George Lucas would have felt about the Galactic Star Cruiser. After all, he created Star Wars to be a cultural touchstone, a story that transcended generations, built on mythology and timeless characters that could resonate with anyone. Lucas's original vision for Star Wars was always inclusive and accessible for fans of all backgrounds and not built around catering to the highest bidder. The high cost of the Galactic Star Cruiser felt like a departure from that vision, turning what should have been a shared cultural experience into a high-end, exclusive venture. The focus on a story tied to the sequel trilogy, with characters like Rey and Kylo Ren, instead of the iconic heroes like Luke, Leia, and Han, was another misstep. While Disney was trying to carry the brand forward, it came at the expense of the legacy of the original trilogy, which Lucas so carefully nurtured. It must have been a jarring contrast to see what Star Wars had become, an expensive, somewhat sterile, themed experience, rather than the vast, accessible galaxy he had envisioned. Lucas's connection to the fans was also key to the brand's success. He knew that Star Wars grew into a cultural phenomenon because it spoke to a massive, diverse audience. But Disney's approach felt more like a cash grab, distancing itself from the spirit of the franchise that made it beloved in the first place. It alienated a lot of the longtime fans, and the backlash, especially from critics like Jenny Nicholson, was swift. Her extensive 4-hour breakdown of the hotel's failure really helped to shine a light on just how far off the mark Disney had gone in trying to recreate that magic. The Galactic Star Cruiser missed the mark in terms of both price and storytelling, failing to capture the heart of what made Star Wars the phenomenon it was, and ultimately it served as a stark reminder of the risks of prioritizing profit over the passion of the fans and the legacy of the original creator.
There's no women in the movies. I said, who do you think the heroes are in those films? What do you think Princess Leia was? She is the head of the rebellion. She's the one that's taking this young kid that doesn't know anything and this boisterous, I know everything guy who can't do anything and trying to save the rebellion with these clowns. I said, she's the hero of the movie. And it's the same thing with Queen Amidala. Even though she has Jedi on her side, she was still the hero prime mover. And they said, well, but there's no women, you know. I said, you can't just put a woman in pants and expect her to be a hero. You know, they can wear dresses, they can wear whatever they want. It's their brains and their ability to think and do and plan and be logistical, and you know, that's what the hero is.
It's hard not to imagine how George Lucas would feel seeing his creation reduced to what was essentially a corporate-driven, sterile experience. Star Wars was never just about flashy effects or high-budget sets. It was about the stories, the characters, and the immersive world that resonated with generations of fans. Lucas built a universe full of wonder and imagination, filled with characters that became icons and places that felt like they lived and breathed. His vision was about universal themes, like good versus evil, hope and redemption, and he used iconic locations, Tatooine, Hoth, the Death Star, to bring those themes to life. The Galactic Star Cruiser represented none of that. The experience felt disjointed from the Star Wars saga fans knew and loved. There were no adventures on Tatooine, no thrilling space battles with Han Solo, and no confrontations with Darth Vader. Instead, Disney chose to center the experience around the sequel trilogy, which, as you pointed out, left many longtime fans, and likely Lucas, feeling disconnected from the heart of the story. The sequel characters like Rey and Kylo Ren never had the same emotional weight or depth as the beloved originals, and the worlds they were placed in lacked the nostalgia that made Star Wars feel so real and immersive. Lucas, who always made an effort to build Star Wars into a universal story accessible to everyone, would likely be disappointed by the overly commercialized, restrictive nature of the Galactic Star Cruiser. It ignored the very foundation that made Star Wars what it was: the characters and worlds that felt alive, that invited exploration, and the immersive storytelling that made every fan feel like they were part of something bigger. It's easy to see how, from Lucas's perspective, this would feel like a hollow imitation, stripped of. The issue of Disney's Star Wars becoming woke is a sensitive and debated topic among fans, especially when considering Lucas's original intent. At the heart of Star Wars was always a focus on universal themes like the battle between good and evil, the hero's journey, and the power of redemption. These timeless elements transcended politics and offered stories that resonated with audiences from all walks of life. But as Disney took control of the franchise, many fans felt that the focus shifted, with modern political agendas sometimes pushing through the storytelling. Lucas was a master of subtlety. He never forced a message, but rather wove important themes into the fabric of his storytelling in ways that felt natural. He allowed audiences to interpret the deeper meanings of his work without it feeling preachy or overly heavy-handed. However, with Disney's Star Wars, particularly in the Galactic Star Cruiser experience, many fans felt like they were being lectured rather than entertained. The storylines, such as Rey's character arc, were seen as forced and not organic, which left some fans feeling like the soul of Star Wars had been lost. Rey's sudden rise to hero status, with little to no real struggle or growth compared to characters like Luke Skywalker, felt like a betrayal of the principles that Lucas valued. In Lucas's original films, character development was earned, and the hero's journey was not just about a character's strength, but their inner transformation. For Lucas, who valued mythology and character development, Rey's rapid ascension to the role of the central hero likely felt inauthentic. It was a shift away from the kind of slow burn, trial and error path that made characters like Luke and Anakin so compelling. Where Luke faced internal and external struggles, Rey's journey seemed overly streamlined. It didn't have the emotional weight or grounding that Lucas infused into the characters he created. Moreover, Disney's focus on modernizing Star Wars for a new generation, often at the expense of its loyal fanbase, likely felt like a slap in the face to Lucas, who worked tirelessly to build a universe that meant so much to so many people. By centering the Galactic Star Cruiser experience on characters from the sequel trilogy, Disney alienated the very audience that Lucas spent decades nurturing. The focus on rebranding the franchise for younger, more progressive audiences sidelined the older fans who had grown up with the original films. To Lucas, Star Wars wasn't just about lightsabers and spaceships. It was about community, legacy, and shared experiences across generations. The shift in direction that Disney took, especially in pushing modern-day political agendas, would likely have felt like a betrayal. The franchise that he had so carefully crafted wasn't just a business. It was a part of pop culture, a connection between generations, and a shared experience for fans. To see it turned into a platform for messages that felt disconnected from the essence of the story must have been frustrating for him, especially as his original vision was so rooted in universal appeal. You're absolutely right. If Disney had stayed true to George Lucas's original vision and tapped into the nostalgia that made Star Wars such a cultural phenomenon, the Galactic Star Cruiser could have been a massive success. Fans weren't asking for a high-priced, restrictive hotel experience centered around the sequel trilogy. They wanted to step into the worlds they had loved for decades, the Tatooines, Hoths, and Endors that shaped their childhoods and imaginations. Imagine a Star Wars hotel designed around those iconic locations, where guests could truly experience the rich universe that Lucas created. Walking through Tatooine, feeling the heat of the Twin Suns while visiting locations like W's Junk Shop or grabbing a drink at Mos Eisley Cantina would have been unforgettable. The hotel could have let guests explore the snow-covered expanse of Hoth or felt the intensity of Mustafar, with rooms and environments reflecting the fiery landscape that marked Anakin's downfall. Instead of being confined to a starship from the sequels, Disney could have created interactive battles with classic villains like Darth Vader, allowing guests to experience the dark presence that made the original trilogy so gripping. And how about a pod racing roller coaster? where you could choose your racer and speed through the deserts of Tatooine. This kind of immersive experience would have tied directly into the iconic moments from the original films, memorable, meaningful, and a true celebration of Star Wars legacy. These ideas would have given fans a chance to live out their favorite Star Wars moments in a way that felt organic and connected to the original universe. It would have resonated deeply with the loyal fanbase that grew up with these characters and locations, tapping into that nostalgia and making the experience feel personal. Disney had a goldmine of opportunity to deliver something special, but instead, they chose to move in a direction that ignored the essence of what made Star Wars beloved in the first place. The heart and soul of Star Wars were in those classic films, and the Galactic Star Cruiser could have been the ultimate homage to that if it had stayed true to Lucas's vision. You make an excellent point. Fans were more than willing to spend money on an experience, but they wanted it to feel authentic to the Star Wars they knew and loved. Disney missed a golden opportunity by disconnecting itself from the very essence of the franchise, which spans across generations. Had they created an immersive environment that paid tribute to the original trilogy, the prequels, and even the sequel trilogy, to an extent, they could have attracted a much wider audience, keeping both longtime fans and newer ones engaged. It's interesting to see George Lucas's candid remarks about the direction of Star Wars post-sale. His insight into the deeper meanings of the Force and the original ideas that were lost after he sold the company shows just how much he understood the heart of the franchise. His perspective on the corporate missteps, especially in how the Force and other elements were handled, resonates with fans who feel the franchise has lost its way. It's rare to hear Lucas publicly criticize the company he helped build, especially considering his large stake in Disney, but his comments give fans a sense of relief knowing that someone who truly understood the world of Star Wars was still keeping an eye on its evolution. The original trilogy, with its blend of westerns, samurai films, and historical references, had such a unique soul, which is what made it resonate with audiences. Lucas's ability to mix these elements into an entirely new mythology was key to Star Wars' enduring success. Disney could have taken that legacy and expanded it, offering a nostalgic yet fresh experience, but instead, they alienated the fanbase that grew up with these iconic films. You raise some excellent points, especially around the idea that Disney's approach to the Galactic Star Cruiser failed not just because of the content, but because of the price and lack of accessibility. Making the experience accessible to more fans through flexible pricing options could have allowed for different levels of immersion, making it available to a much broader audience. A tiered pricing system could have offered guests the option to engage in a Star Wars-themed hotel stay for those who wanted a simpler experience, while allowing others to dive fully into an interactive story. This flexibility would have kept the experience fresh and allowed fans from all walks of life to engage with the franchise on their own terms. The focus on nostalgia-driven experiences and meaningful content that honored Lucas's legacy could have resulted in something truly special. A Star Wars experience that made fans feel connected to the stories, characters, and places they loved would have been something memorable for all generations of Star Wars fans, something that Lucas himself could have been proud of. Instead, the Galactic Star Cruiser became a costly mistake, ending in a quick closure after just 19 months. The shift to using the building for office space was a stark reminder of how far off the mark Disney had missed, and the financial repercussions were severe, with a $300 million write-off. For Disney, the closure of the Galactic Star Cruiser signals a need for a major reset. With Star Wars still a beloved property, they have the potential to regain fan trust, but it requires reconnecting with the heart of the franchise. This means embracing Lucas's original vision for Star Wars and focusing on timeless storytelling that resonates with fans who have loved the saga for decades. Celebrating the entire Star Wars universe, not just the sequel trilogy, could help bring fans back on board and create a more inclusive, meaningful experience. I agree that Star Wars has so much potential in terms of creating immersive experiences, and I would have loved to see something that paid homage to the classic films and explored iconic moments from all generations. Visiting Tatooine, facing off against Darth Vader, or racing through the sands of Boon to Eve would have been a dream come true for many fans. Imagine being able to step into the Death Star, feel the weight of the tension between Vader and Luke, or experience the thrills of a pod racing roller coaster. For Disney, moving forward requires not just better content, but a deeper understanding of what makes Star Wars special to fans. If they can tap into the rich mythology and character-driven stories that George Lucas laid out, there's still hope for the galaxy far, far away.